with that. And then throughout the session, if you have questions that pop up, feel free to go ahead and use the question and answer or the chat. Both features are left open for you to use. So without that, I will just go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jamie Sennett, and I am a member of the staff in the Alumni Engagement Office here at Illinois State. And I am honored to introduce our presenters today. So with us today, we have Dr. Nathan Hartman, who is an Associate Professor of Management in the Department of Management and Quantitative Methods. He received his PhD from Virginia Commonwealth University. And we have Dr. Joe Goodman, who's an associate professor also in management, excuse me, in the College of Business Management in the Department of Management and Quantitative Methods. He received his PhD from the University of Mississippi. So welcome, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan Hartman. I'm going to lead off first. So Joe, if some weird stuff's happening, you'll let me know, right?
Yes, I will.
Joe and I are both professors in the Department of Management, and we're always interested in leadership and new trends. And so virtual leadership is something that we've been talking about and some of the interesting things that are related to that. So what I'll do is I'll try to talk for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions if people have got them. Or want to talk about something related to what I've presented. And then after that, Joe will jump in and do the same thing. And then we'll kind of go from there. So basically the question is virtual leadership even a thing? And let me advance my slide here, maybe. Before the pandemic, it was already happening. So we already have a lot of workers that were working from home or had worked from home. And we already had workers that, even though they were fully face-to-face, that had worked with remote team members or worked with people that are virtual contractors or those kinds of things. But now that we've been in the pandemic, there were lots of organizations that were sort of questioning the value or the probability of working from home. And so most organizations have been forced, at least in some way, to jump in with both feet to find out how possible it is for them and their employees to be productive in a virtual space. And so even if they haven't been fully productive, there's a high likelihood that when we go back, digital, virtual, agile work practices are going to be the types of things that managers are going to be asked to do in a more normal responsibility, and things that were essentially impossible or improbable before are definitely considered to be more probable and possible going forward. And so I'll try to present a couple of things that I think are pretty contemporary and interesting that face managers as they have workers that have gone into the virtual space, and some of the challenges that they might face. So the first thing as the manager, right, we sort of have to be like the Matthew McConaughey character of our organization. We have to tell everybody everything's going to be all right, and nothing bad's going to happen, and it's all going to work out, and we're all going to be just as happy as we were before, right? We need to sort of control the anxiety and nervousness that people have. So the reality is that it is going to be harder. There's more distance. That's going to create coordination problems with employees. There's going to be changes in the way that you see people. So we saw them in the hallways, talked about their kids, what they did on the weekend, all those kinds of things were incidental communications. And now we're in a virtual environment. The incidental communications are going to be more difficult and more scripted. And so what we know about our employees and how we know about their lives and what's going on for them is going to be different. And so it's going to change how we see them. And also they can control a little bit more on how they want to be seen. So if they want to pull back and be more professional, they're able to do that. And they can sort of kind of create a virtual identity like many people do on Facebook and Snapchat and those kinds of things. So there's the place and time differences, but there's also operational issues. So how big can virtual teams be and still be productive? How many projects or processes can they manage in a virtual space? And what kind of skill differences can I have with inside my team? So before I might have had teams where I had highly skilled people working with novices and intermediate level people. Maybe in a virtual environment, I might need to put the highly skilled people on the same team and the novices on the same team. So that way I can facilitate and mentor the novices through their work in a way that's different than I might do for the expert or experienced level people. but also the types of things that we liked about our job and our organization were very visual and very present when we were in a face-to-face setting. So now when I'm working in my virtual space, I've created the symbols of what values I hold for my work and for my life. And so there's no boss who's putting motivational posters on the walls at my house. So that kind of connectivity that we might have had before has gotten farther apart as well. So one thing we want to do as managers in the virtual environment is try to reduce the distance. So we want to try to make people feel valued and connected and feel part of the organization and its mission and its goals. And so we're going to do, instead of just doing phone calls, we might do video calls. Instead of doing emails, we might call people on the phone, right? So we're trying to think about how can we make the distance from one person to another a little bit smaller. So how do we collaborate effectively in the virtual environment? So one thing we have to recognize is that body language is gone. But as we all know, if you get an email from your spouse telling you that you forgot to do something, it doesn't just say, Nathan, you forgot to do something. It says, I told you a million times to do that. How come you can never remember? I'm going to be mad and yell at you when you get home. So we interpret the text of the information to have feelings and emotions that aren't actually present in the language. And so when we're working in a remote setting, we need to make sure that we're, trying to be as clear as possible, but remember that miscommunication is way more likely. So we want to try to avoid brief communications because that gives us a chance to be more misinterpreted. Some people do prefer short communication, but we need to sort of check and see if that still works. If I tell them a few things, can they run with it or can they not? People also have a preference for humor and informality, but that doesn't always translate very well into the virtual space. And so that's another challenge, the way in which we might have, sort of connected with people in a relaxed way may not be as possible in a virtual environment. We want to try to send less messages, not more. We shouldn't email someone and then email them later to ask if they got the same email. We shouldn't email and text the same information. And we need to think about what's the right amount of information to send someone. Other things you might think about doing in a virtual environment is to put sort of little headers on our subject lines. So like the for HR, 4-hour response needed. I need a response within 4 hours. The NNRT, no need to respond. Or I might put some client information on a Google Doc or on a WhatsApp group or on a Microsoft team or on a OneDrive. So that way all the information that's relevant to that product or that customer is in one spot. If I text, email, Facebook, Twitter, OneDrive, Google Drive, WhatsApp, all the information. So part of the information virtually becomes, part of the skill becomes combining all the information into one spot, even though it's not given to me in one location. So I need to think about how I'm going to compartmentalize the information that people need and what rules should we govern how the information is shared so that part of the new skill isn't hunting and finding. Like we're not trying to make the job about hide and seek, right? We're trying to get the information to the people that need it in a way in which they can find it and effectively use it. So another thing to sort of think about is we might view the virtual world a little bit differently. So as a leader in a face-to-face place, right, I'm managing the process of work and I'm thinking that people need to be very active. And so I'm just going to convert that into the virtual space. I'm going to have an open door check-in policy, Twitter, email, Zoom, Facebook. And then just like I would in a face-to-face setting, if I'm not seeing people or hearing people, I'll just take a little walk around the workplace and see what's happening to get people back into the process of work. In the virtual environment, that means I might call people or text people to see how the day's going or how the project's going, even though they didn't ask for me. That same behavior from the worker setting might mean I have to go online and I have to demonstrate that I've been online for a long time so that my boss knows I'm doing stuff. And I'm sort of showing that I'm going through the process or activity of work related to my job to verify to this person that I don't need them. And I need to do that all day, every day for 5 days. And potentially that's why I might burn out a little bit faster in the virtual environment because I'm going to this sort of proving phase. The leader might also say, like in the third one down there, is that I wasn't trained for this. There's no class on this. There's no HR policies for virtual leadership or virtual management. And in fact, the entire organization was designed for face-to-face, and now I'm supposed to do it in a virtual setting. So the worker might take the same experience and say, no one knows what they're doing. We have to hold 10 Zoom meetings. And in all those meetings, no decisions ever get made. Everything's taking longer. Every meeting seems to be, the solution is going to be, we're going to meet again later and have another meeting. And so the enthusiasm for the work process goes down, the ability to stay focused goes down. And because we keep needing to have so many meetings, the desire to have a high quality product the first time is reduced, because anytime someone from a new department or a new department head gets on there, they say they want something else. And so what was the point of making a great product the first time? We're just going to change it anyways. So everybody gets pretty frustrated. And so this can be another obstacle that we have to sort of deal with. So another thing we're thinking in terms of management is, what are people doing when they're virtually working? So if you look in the upper right-hand corner, some people might be creating a perfectly replicated workspace that's their office, and now it's just at home. Everything's in its place and everybody's doing a good job. But other people might sort of be like Walter here on the left, who said, I'm finally free from the office shackles. I can go create whatever work environment I want. I'm going to bring my fishing pole, my coffee maker. I'm going to go out into the wilderness and do everything virtually. There's no rules. I can just recreate. It's like an adventure to this type of person. Or the person on the right, now my work and home life has been combined. And so the only way to be a productive worker is to hold my life hostage, right? Literally, while I'm doing the work that I need to do to get paid to make the life happen. And so in a virtual leadership scenario, any one of these three things might be happening at the same time. Some workers might go from Walter to holding people hostage to creating the perfect work environment over a series of weeks or months. So these are some of the things I don't know how the process of work is happening, and potentially is very different from how I'm experiencing it. And so now how do I help these people, right? Is sort of a challenge that we run into in the virtual environment. Oh, that was me. I'm like, who's talking? Oh, sorry about that. Give me 1 second to fix that. I was practicing. That was me talking in the practice. Sorry about that. In the organizational identity, so that's something that we form, right, in a face-to-face routine of work. And so when I'm thinking about the workplace, I have a routine of work because I want people to know what their role is in the organization, who they communicate with, why their job is important, how to get the job done. And so how I see myself, right, if my company is entrepreneurial, I say I'm somewhat entrepreneurial. If my company is good at technology, I say I'm somewhat good at technology. So the relationships we have, the habits we have in the workplace help define who we are as a worker in that organization and who we are as a person. And so that sort of validates it. If I change my role, like if I go from an employee to a manager, right, I go through a process where I reevaluate again, what's my new role, what's my new value, what does it mean to be a worker in this company? So it's natural that identity can be destabilized. And so we create doubts on what our role is and how we are valued by the organization. So these are things that happen when we go into the virtual space. There becomes this destabilization where now there's no normal way of doing the job. There's no people that I interact with in a face-to-face way that show me how the work is done. It's all happening kind of behind closed doors or behind virtual backgrounds or however it might be. And so when I'm leading people face-to-face, I kind of encourage people to go through a certain process so that what they're doing becomes clear that that's a goal of the organization. When I'm in a virtual environment, I can't observe them unless they make them turn the camera on for 8 hours to validate the steps they're going through are what the organization wants them to accomplish. So I'm having an identity shock as a virtual worker. Who am I? If it used to be where I work, well, what if I don't exactly work in that spot anymore? So what's my occupation? What's my work environment? Who are my new relationships? Who are my clients, right? And so I'm going through this shock, right? And I lack a social environment. And I used to have this dual role where I was at a face-to-face place, and now I had a life at home. Now they're the same place. So what does that mean? And so we as a worker, we need to sort of develop a process to sort of reduce this anxiety. And this is where managers can step in. And if you sort of look at the bottom right hand of the picture, right, even the employee may not have a good idea of how it's working for them. They might think they're very organized and everything's very efficient. But if we were to actually observe them, what it really feels like is they're going crazy, and it's very difficult to sort of transition into this virtual space and who's helping me and what am I supposed to be doing? So there's kind of this ambivalence, right? So I'm questioning, I'm in this phase where some good things are happening and I feel somewhat good about working virtually. There's some bad things happening. I'm not sure what that means. So we're kind of in this rock and a hard place scenario. And here's where leaders, right, can sort of intercede. They can do good things, which increase trust, engagement, and they cause the people to be effective communicators, or they can do negative things that make people become more distrustful, more disengaged, and the employees only engage in the minimum level of communication. So there's something called the endowment effect, right? So when I take ownership of something, I feel like it's more valuable than it actually is. And so one of the things we need to do as leaders is to ask the employees to engage in the process of defining what it means to be a virtual worker in that role. So taking part in determining what remote work is at this company, what types of things we do at what time. So the employee's own behavior begins to create the ownership of what this job is. I'm recreating, I'm crafting how my importance is going to be translated into the organizational setting. And by taking part in an organizational process, I know I'm a member. By describing what our work outputs are, I know what my role is, what my products are, right? I'm getting a picture of how it goes. Other things that organizations do is they just send a lot of information from executives and say, I know you're remote working right now, and I just want to say what a great job you're doing. And I know it's been a challenge, but you're meeting it, and our clients are still happy, and you're still doing what you need to do. So the executives are sort of giving this positive information, but this is more passive. And so in the passive environment, we have other people now in our home setting. We have roommates, we've got parents, we've got spouses who can now observe how it looks to work in your company. And if those people say, why did your company do it that way? Or why doesn't your boss help you? Or why is your company so mean to you? Then those tend to win. So I need the manager, right, to sort of help prevent these negative, credible outside forces from winning the battle. So as people have people at home that are criticizing the work environment and questioning why we're doing it that way, they may not leave the organization today, but when the economy gets better or opportunities arise, these people have sort of lost some of the commitment to the company because they were already questioning what their job was. Now that they're virtual, and now they've got some person that's credible to them saying that maybe they're not that valued or the job's not that good. So when other opportunities come around, they decide to take those up. Supervisors and leaders need to allow the team, right, to decide for themselves what the team does, what the work is. They need to think about what kind of actions are necessary. We can visibly show some of the work processes, so we could live stream, or somebody could do a customer phone call and they could do it on Zoom. So we could do some role playing or role modeling of what we're going to do in the virtual environment and how that might have been different from our face-to-face environment. But the worst thing we can do is be ambiguous, because that allows me, like that Walter guy living in his minivan, doing his job, to basically make it up as I go along. And some of it might be great. Some of it might be terrible. I might skip steps, or I might not do it at all like we need to do. So there's no agreed upon path. So something we could do as an organization is we could do this first for ourselves as a supervisor. We could say, well, what would I reveal to a job applicant now that they're working virtual? What do we spend a lot of time doing? It's related to what, for who, like what is it that we're doing in this job? Or we could do this with our virtual employee to sort of reinforce, these are the things that we're doing in the virtual environment. These are the things that are in products that are important for this job. We could also think about what was important about this job before it was virtual, and are those the same things that are important to the job now that it is virtual? So in the virtual environment, right, how do I want someone to identify with the job? What do I want them to be? So I was working for ISU because we were regarded as very successful and dynamic, with good face-to-face relationships with our students. I probably can't say that now that we're going into a virtual time, right? I need to think about, well, what is that going to mean in the virtual setting? These are the two things that are a part of this job that mean that we were successful, right? So people were getting the information, and they were, right, what are our customers happy for? What are we known for? Just a couple more slides here, and then I'll open it up. So again, it's a shock going virtual because the structure of the relationship is very different. So I don't know what it feels like to be a team member when I'm in the virtual environment the same way I did before. And so the discontinuities of the environment make other sources of information more important, right? And so like when you're in a relationship and someone says, where do you think this relationship is going? That's usually not a very fun question on the third date or the fifth year of marriage or whatever, right? But when employees ask those same questions, right, it means they're searching for answers. And those tend to naturally happen when we're at least beginning to work in the virtual environment or when we're facing a lot of obstacles in the virtual environment. So the last thing here is that dual earners, right? Now we have two people that might be working virtually at home. And so virtual workers, they're going to bring their work habits home. They probably won't have the same persona, professional persona online that they have offline. And so now the leader in the organization have an in-home critic who might also be a successful professional. So it's not just like they're driving home and they're talking to the gardener. They're talking to someone else who might be a professional in that same organization or in other organizations that might be doing it different. So that person can be a critic or a champion to help that person. So when both professionals, both significant others living in the same place are struggling, right, it's worse. And so people who receive support, they tend to adapt better than those that don't. And so if the spouses can't provide the support, then the leader needs to. And it's can be a benefit. So if I'm a supervisor that's helping my employee adapt to the virtual environment, that employee also helps their spouse adapt to the virtual environment. And then it becomes a pretty important experience because both people become more successful and the now combined home work life becomes more successful and more satisfying. And we sort of need to recognize that 63% of people in the US that have kids are dual career earners. And it's not uncommon for people to ask these kinds of questions. So if my spouse is struggling with their job and I'm watching them struggle at home during the pandemic, I might say, well, why can't this person be happy like they were before? Is it a career problem or is it a relationship problem? Am I to blame? And so why is the spouse a critic of what's happening in the work? Because they're worried that the reason that the work is not going well is because the home life isn't going well. So they're doing this sort of relationship detective work that starts to interfere with things that might have been going just fine before, right? And so this is a problem that we have to sort of think about in terms of virtual management, and sort of letting workers and teams work together to solve these can be pretty important. And then the last challenge is when they go back to face-to-face, if you ask them to do that, they're basically going to go through the whole process over again. All the routines and all the destabilization of identity, all the questions we asked, well, I used to do it this way when I was working from home. Why do I have to do it this way when I'm working at the organization? All of those same questions will come back. And so this is a skill that we'll probably need to carry over into the future, even if we're bringing people back into the face-to-face setting, because, right, it's going to be, again, sort of this anxiety creating event where it's not just going to go smoothly back to the way that it was before. So hopefully that wasn't too fast. And so that sort of wrap up mine. Does anybody have any questions, or Joe, were there questions popping up in the chat?
I don't see any yet. Oh, JD says that was fantastic. JD, you're being kind.
Thanks, JD.
I think, yes, we can get copies of the slides to everyone. We could probably post those in the chat function to pull off. Oh, Martin Bennett has one question. So Martin says he works in an environment with 3 time zones. What do you do when everyone on your team is working different hours based on their particular home needs?
So I guess I've worked in different settings, right, where usually what happens is the boss's time zone becomes the most important. And so that can be the worst case scenario, because some people have to get up very early just to sort of make sure they're on team meetings and those kinds of things. I think in general, you have to sort of get a sense of what is the actual work flow inside the department or the team. and how dependent is it that they're co-working at the same time. So if people can work asynchronously, then the time zone component, as a supervisor, if I feel like I need to watch people for 8 hours a day, then I'm essentially adding 2 additional hours to my workday because I'm watching Eastern, Central, and Mountain time zones, right? So if I can give that up, if I can give up the observation part of the job, then it becomes easier. If people have to be synchronous and I as a leader have to be a part of it, then it becomes more difficult because I'm basically extending my day to match the time zones, and it probably would be difficult to have a good balance. I don't know, Joe, do you
No,
have a
I was
better?
going to tell you, we're getting some questions in and some great questions because we seem to have an amazing international audience here with individuals working in India, the Philippines, Switzerland, Latin America, and juggling that kind of virtual process. I'm not well versed on how to answer that one, so I'll hand that one to you.
I guess I would say that one of my feelings as a boss, right, part of my identity as a boss in an office setting is I can see how important I am because I'm sitting there looking over the land that the people that I influence. If I take all that away and put it into a virtual space and then extend it across the globe, how am I important as the boss if I feel like the interaction with me is the success that I have as a leader? Then basically it'll be very difficult to go into the virtual environment. If I can let go of all of that relationship, uh, if I can open it up, right, to say, I care about the work product, I care about the customer satisfaction. If I want to be the person that removes obstacles from your work environment, then it becomes easier to sort of lead them. But it's a very empowering type of leadership, and not every employee is ready for that kind of leadership. So if I'm going to empower someone on a 12-hour difference from myself, that person has to pretty much be self-motivated, right? And that otherwise it's not going to work. So there's going to be some selection challenges there, or hiring challenges, that you have to match people with that kind of job expectation. I don't know. I feel like I'm not doing a good job on answering that question.
So we've got another question that came up that is very interesting. Is while working remotely, let's say that you suspect that your employee is impaired. They're under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and what should you do if you can't physically observe them?
I guess I would say that if they had that kind of problem, they probably had that in a face-to-face setting, and we weren't able to detect it because they didn't have to type out sensible emails before. Yeah, there's whatever percentage of functional alcoholics, for example, that exist in the world. They were in the face-to-face environment as well, right? The 3 martini lunch was something that happened in the face-to-face workplace as well. Essentially, all you can do is create the disciplinary track of work quality violations and then put them on a discipline plan. If you feel it's a substance abuse problem, I'm not sure you can really suggest anything because you can't tell them they need a counselor or go to AA. So I guess it's only going to come down to the work quality. I guess, Joe, you're more in the HR law. I guess if that's where we're stuck, right?
Yeah, when you have individuals that you think are impaired at work, you've got to get your HR department involved. And depending upon, I'm unsure of what state this question may have come from. Depending upon your state, dictates how you can respond to this. If their impairment is definitely impacting their day-to-day activities, it's time to intervene. Okay. So maybe if it say in Illinois, you do have some protections. You have what's called good faith protections as their supervisor, but you're going to want to consult with your HR department and how you intervene with the individual, especially if it's a work-related problem. And I know in this environment, we're kind of tentative to do any disciplinary action but this, you have to look at and how the things will play out procedurally is, would you have tolerated this in an in-person environment? And the answer is no, then you go ahead and move forward with disciplinary actions and terminable. Of course, if you have a labor union involved, you would have to have their shop steward involved in any disciplinary aspects as well.
And my guess would be that what they would, if it seemed to be a pattern, they would ask, all of a sudden, your boss is going to be on the Zoom call on Fridays. They're going to start getting more observers on there. And I guess the question would come down to how many steps you want to take for forgiveness versus, if they have a direct customer facing job, there's not much leeway probably that you can grant that person if they don't voluntarily choose to go into some sort of treatment plan.
So one last question for you, Nathan, here is we have individuals who are spending many more hours than they would like to online. And they're just burnt out with Zoom meetings. What's the best way to balance their time of online?
Well, I guess I would say in real life, so we have the value stream, right? Like, what activities create value inside the organization? I haven't been to many meetings that actually created value. So I would say that that's a question that we have to ask ourselves. Are the leadership team saying that they need to have meetings to demonstrate their value in the organization? Or right, like what's the purpose of the meetings? And if they're not creating value, then we have to alter the process in some way. There's fatigue is real, but part of what the Zoom meetings are, it's just the reality of the job, and you have to sort of decide how many things we're going to do to deliver our product. Are we having a meeting right now about a problem we might have 6 months from now that doesn't need action for 3 months? Then maybe we don't need to have that. But I would suggest probably eliminating about 50% of the meetings right now would be not a bad solution. When we're consulting with organizations in a face-to-face setting, that's almost always what we find is the person who thought the meeting was most important was the supervisor. The employees almost never rate that the meetings were important. And most supervisors right now, I guess I'm not stealing your thunder, Joe. Most leaders right now are reporting that they miss having meetings with their employees. No employee right now is reporting that they miss having meetings with their boss, right? So who wants this meeting and what's its purpose? Potentially the employees just don't know how to communicate. They're not finding much value from the outcome. And I would use traditional project management strategies like, what's the task? Who's the task owner? What's the report out dates? The more you can do that in the meetings, the more the value becomes determinable. If there's no owner and there's no report back date, then it probably wasn't that worthwhile. If there are owners, then people who own the task know that it's important, and they know on what date that value will be delivered to the stakeholder. Does that sound good, Joe?
Well, it's hard because you want, when you have unique situations, we all want that magic. This is the one thing that's going to do. And this virtual environment is so complex, and as people are all over the place, and they're juggling home life, school life, married life, partnership life, work life, it's just become a blur. And so
I mean, I guess I'm from Michigan. I learned as a kid that most people went hunting to hide from their family, not because they like deer hunting. So work is kind of like that. A lot of people went to work and stayed late because they didn't have to come home and face issues that they had at home. Well, now if you work at home the whole time, it's a whole new challenge.
So I think this is probably a good time for me to get into the psychological processes. And so what Nathan was talking about is the so what. And so how I'll go from here is I'll go with the so why. And make sure. So am I on, Nathan?
Yes, Joe, we see everything.
Okay. And so what Nathan is talking about is people are learning in an environment. And we have to kind of understand what learning is. And the definition of learning is the relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of some experience. And there's been two broad categories that we classify learning theorists in. And we classify them in as behaviorism theorists, where this idea is that you must experience everything, and it's through positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment that your behavior is shaped. Where positive reinforcement, when someone does something that is acceptable, you give them a positive reinforcer. A negative reinforcer is you continue to apply a incentive to engaging in that behavior. So if you can imagine when you get into your vehicle, if you don't buckle or fasten your seatbelt, the car simply goes ding, 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 ding until the seatbelt's in there. That's a negative reinforcer. And one of the negative reinforcers that you've had when you weren't virtual is you could walk around to your employees and ensure that they were on task and on point. And that's no longer there. And then, of course, punishment is when the behavior is so severe that you have to apply a negative consequence. And so behaviorism is we learn through our own experiences. Whereas the social cognitive theorists, they started to articulate in the late 1950s and the 1960s, early 1960s, that we can't actually learn vicariously. We don't have to experience something. I can watch something from another. And through that vicarious learning, then I can also pick up those reinforcers. And when we're in the virtual environment, those social cognitive role model reinforcers just aren't there. So we're shifting back to our behaviorism and what am I getting from my manager, from my leader? And for any of this to work, a researcher by the name of Thorndike discussed this idea of law of effect. So as soon as you have the behavior you want to encourage or the behavior you want to disencourage, you want to move your reinforcer or punishment as close to it so they know, in fact, what they're being reinforced and punished for. Now, you must keep in mind that learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior. And without reinforcement and or punishment, we have extinction of the desired behaviors. Now, what you see on the screen is a broken Pampered Chef ceramic pot. I don't know what the material really is made out of. And my wife went upstairs to do something and said, hey, I have some muffins in the oven. Can you take them out? Now, as a grown adult, I know that ovens are hot. And I've been taught that my whole life. But for some bizarre reason, I opened the oven and put my hands in and grabbed this muffin pan with my bare hands. And it wasn't until I was moving it to the island that my brain told my fingers, you're burning yourself. And that was that punishment. I got burnt. So it reinforced to me that, yeah, our ovens are hot. And as employees are going through things, we want to reinforce and or punish those behaviors that we see desirable. So that's the one mechanism, how we learn. We also have to understand that cognitively, we're what's called cognitive misers. We like to make a lot of mental shortcuts. It's not good, it's not bad. It's just we're processing so much information on a day-to-day basis that we have to rely on schemas and heuristics to get through life. And it helps us with these mental shortcuts process information faster and get to better decision making and our behaviors. Now, a schema is a cognitive framework from sorting information. It helps us navigate familiar, unfamiliar. You're using kind of cognitive rubrics, any perceived social roles, stereotypes, or worldviews that you've been exposed to. And if they're in your schema, it's pretty much formed. Then you use what's called a heuristic to navigate that schema as a decision-making tool. And it helps you make these mental shortcuts and helps you get to a decision rather quickly. We've all heard the adage that, how many seconds does it take to make a first impression with someone? And when I ask my undergraduate students, they're always, well, it takes, a minute, 30 seconds. And it's really, the answer is in a tenth of a second, someone has decided they like you or they don't like you. And they've got you in that schema, I like, I don't like, and they're using their heuristics to fill in the gap. And what gets reinforced depends on how you stay. And the same thing is true about how we process our work roles and our work expectations. And you have to remember, whether we're the leader or the subordinate, we're all cognitive misers, so we might as well own it. Now, this is one of the one, prove me, show me. We can see this is how heuristics work in action. And so you have half of a phrase blotted out. And what your mind has probably concluded is that first phrase reads jumping to conclusion. It's used a past schema and a heuristic to make a decision, when in fact, it's nonsensical. It doesn't mean that at all, but your brain fills in gaps. So when we have missing information, those schemas, heuristics kick in. So the second phrase, if you're seeing ice cream is good, you're probably thinking there's no way he could have done this twice, or maybe he did this just to trick us. The answer is no. Even knowing the shortcoming of your schemas and heuristics, your brain still has a way of overriding and filling in incomplete information with past information you had. So that's how we get to accountability. Now, accountability becomes, your perceptions of your employees' accountability becomes their decision-making tool. They're going to rely on these past schemas and interactions with you and work through them. Now, accountability defined as the expectation that you must justify yourself to an audience that has reward or coercive power. That's when you see yourself accountable. So how we cope with our accountabilities, the first thing we use is what's called the availability heuristic. I want to know what my audience wants, and that's what I give them. I do not deviate. The preemptive self-criticism heuristic is, I understand I'm going to have to account for my behavior or action. I just don't know for what yet. And in a learning setting, a preemptive self-criticism is a great heuristic to rely on, because it requires you to be a higher order thinker and more critical in how you approach things. Where the availability heuristic, you simply give the audience what it wants so that you know they were pacified and happy. Then we have what we call the retrospective rationalization. And this is when you're held to account and you didn't realize you had to account. So then you begin to justify your actions and try to make sense of them. And there's a researcher at the University of Michigan says we're all really irrational thinkers. We're just rational justifiers. The next is what we call defensive bolstering. This is exactly what you think it is. You dig your heels in, and I made this decision because, and I'm not budging. And then, of course, there is the blissful ignorance. And what we're learning from Nathan in his presentation, the so what, is you have to be very clear in your expectations. So in other words, we have to get into that employee's availability heuristic and remove those ambiguities. These are the expectations that we're looking for. Now, accountability is what's called a phenomenological in nature. What that means is this is an approach that concentrates on the study of consciousness and objects of direct experience. And it's evolving and it's always changing. And we're relying on things like self-identification theory, as Nathan's pointed out. How do I see myself? How do I define myself as a person? Do I define myself as a spouse first and then a worker, or a worker first? It varies for every individual. We also operate under what we call role theory. And we have different roles in our lives. And up to this point, your employees have been able to separate themselves and just concentrate from that work perspective. So you see yourself as part of an organization. Maybe you see yourself as a team member of the group. You see yourself in your dyadic relationship, maybe with your supervisor or individual coworker. And of course, we can never forget that part of our role is seeing ourselves accountable to us. Then we have to understand another phenomenological nature called the process versus outcome accountability. And in a face-to-face setting, we were looking at stacking processes together, and I can hold you accountable for those processes and know the outcome will get there. In a virtual environment, you're really shifting more to outcome accountability. And I'm being a little more specific in what my deliverable is. And I'm relying on that availability heuristic to paint the picture for the things that you need to do. If we look at this big picture, so you've got this social cognitive schema going up, and it's your internal accountabilities and then your external accountabilities. So borrowing from that role theory, your external accountabilities would be your dyadic relationships you're engaged in at work and your work groups. And in the absence of internalizing this stuff, you're looking to your supervisor, you're looking to your work group to see what the norms and the mores are to guide our behaviors. That internal accountabilities is myself and the organization. And this may seem unique. It's like, well, the organization is a collection of people. Yes, that pushes it more to a work group. The organization itself, the policies and procedures, I need to internalize those as the employee, and then they become part of who I am. They're my guiding value system. That's what we mean by culture. What has happened now in this virtual environment is we also have this same social cognitive map for our family relationships, our private relationships outside of work. And unfortunately, these cognitive maps have blended over each other, and it's become more difficult to distinguish to whom and which audience I'm accountable to. And that duality of accountability is I have to give preference to one over the other. Maybe it's a child with homework versus getting a work project done. There's some decisions that have to be made. We also must understand the role of time perspective in our schemas and heuristics. The planning fallacy is the extent to which we approach tasks with optimism, and we seem to always underestimate the actual time that is needed. And part of the reasons why is we're just not as good at time management as we think we are. And we think we can multitask better than we can. And an experiment that I like to do with my students to show, hey, you're not a good multitasker, is with your right hand, move your hands in a circle, set that down. And then with your left hand, move your hands in a square. And you can do each one of those individually. But if you try to do them together, it's nonsensical. And it's a lot harder than to pat your head and rub your tummy. That's us trying to operate and manage projects. And if we don't have sound deductive logic from past projects, we tend to really underestimate the amount of time needed to complete that. Something else to consider is what we call Parkinson's law. This is work will expand to fill the time frame allotted. I had a good friend who works in a bank, and he says, if I give my employees 4 hours worth of work, they take 8 hours to do it. If I give them 12 hours worth of work, they get it done in 8 hours. And as the supervisor, you've got to be a little more proactive with your employees and expectations of time allotment for work. And where those process accountabilities were coming in play, maybe we're a little clearer with our outcome accountabilities, and it's please get it done. And here is the hard deadline. We also have what's called Hofstadter's law. This is the extent to which it's always going to take you longer to complete something, even when you know about Hofstadter's law, meaning it's going to take you longer. So what you want to do is be more effective with goal setting. And could it be a useful tool? Yes, goal setting is a useful tool as long as it's a bi-directional communication between you and your employee. If you allow managers to simply set your goals, they may be outside of the employee's zone or the stretch nature of that goal. If you allow the employee just to set goal, our research shows that employees who self-set goals without management input are simply setting goals for impression management strategy anyway, and they will overpromise and underdeliver. So as long as goal setting is bi-directional and you are doing those old things like Peter Drucker said, management by objectives, and you're tweaking those goals with things in mind, that outcome accountability will be easier to obtain. That leads us to now, do we hold someone to account? Well, yes, if you have cleared up that availability heuristic, you remove the ambiguity, you understand the prescriptions, They identify with the work project, they were engaged in an event, and then there was a violation of any one of those. Hold that individual to account, but be careful. There's something called the fundamental attribution error. And from an individual perspective, this is the tendency for me to underemphasize situational explanations for my behavior. So when something goes wrong, I'm going to shift off that blame and say, well, it was because of situational factors. But when something goes right, it was all me. It was all my effort. When in fact, it could have been situational that way as well. Then we also have what we call the diffusion of responsibility. And in a virtual environment, you're going to have to be specific and identify and make that person accountable. Remove that preemptive self-criticism heuristic, get to that availability heuristic, give them the prescription. Because the diffusion of responsibility is the tendency for people to wait for others to act before making the decision or engaging in behavior. And the more people you have in the group, or the more people you have in the decision-making process, the more likely it is you're going to have someone refuse to do something. And that's what it means by diffusion of responsibility. You're waiting for someone else to step up. You know, we all joke, maybe you're at an elevator and you can see the button is pushed, but someone walks up and pushes the button because maybe some point in their life, they've walked up to an elevator and everyone was standing there and no one pushed the button because they thought someone else did it. Or maybe there was a perceived locked door into a meeting and everyone was waiting for someone to unlock the door. These kind of behaviors, they spill over into other actionable items at work. So to create that remote culture of accountability, you have to keep in mind that it is phenomenological in nature, and individuals are using their schematas and heuristics, and they're navigating how they see themselves in the roles that you expect of them, and it's ever changing. You can never underestimate one's personality. Personalities can be a little stronger than situational constraints, and in some cases, you must know your employees. Their personality may need stronger situational cues. And so this is where the more you know your team and your specific members and their personalities, you understand which task can be assigned and how much input they need or lack thereof. We have to understand the idea of their commitment level, and we'll speak of three broad commitments: affective commitment, continuance commitment, and normative commitment. And with affective commitment, that means there's an emotional attachment to myself and my organization. I am enveloped in the culture, the mission. This is who the company is to me. I'm the company is me, that we're one in each other. And the stronger that bond of affective commitment, you're getting more engagement. They're willing to engage in things, maybe some more pro-social behaviors to help other team members out. Their task performance is a little bit better because they've bought into the work. Continuous commitment is I'm staying with my job because I have to. I have no better option. And what we're finding in some of our research in the shift to virtual environment is individuals are realizing, like, why do I work for this company anymore? Maybe I'd stay just because of the benefit, and they're quickly looking for other jobs to go elsewhere. Well, with continuous commitment, you also, if they're staying just because there's no better options for them, you're not going to get the best task performance out of them, or they're going to do the minimal of that availability heuristic. So you're going to have to be a little more specific in what you expect from them. Normative commitment is you're staying with the company because everyone else tells you it's a good company to work for. You really can't stand it, but they must be right and they see something that you don't see. And unfortunately, there's not good data on this normative commitment. We get better information from affective and continuance commitment. And the last thing is to remember the role of emotion regulation and emotion contagion. These are very real, and emotions need a target. And unfortunately, in an environment with unclear expectations and ambiguity, my emotions are going to get the better of me, and they're going to need to have a target. And you have to remember that as a leader as well, and how you interact with your subordinates, because in turn, that contagion, that spillover continues to go elsewhere. And so with that, I will use the last few minutes for questions and stop sharing my screen. Nathan, did we get anything?
I think people were waiting while you were talking.
Okay.
But one thing I would say is, like you were talking about visible signs of accountability, I like to do this one. So, oh, I'm hearing what you're saying. Joe, can you say that again so I can write it down? That feels a little bit different when I'm like, hey, even if my pen never touches the paper, the people on the other end feel like now that it's been written down, something important just happened, because that's kind of like the going to the principal's office.
Yeah, and I forgot when they had questions for you, I forgot about in my presentation that international audience. Something that is unique to you guys that are working internationally is you have to understand power distance relationships and how those different cultures see power distance. Whether it's the Philippines, India, Brazil, Mexico, they interact with their supervisors a little bit differently. And I'm not an expert on all of the countries and their power distance, but I do know it's important.
Joe, can you give any tips on how to help people manage employees' emotions during the pandemic? That was a question provided.
I am not a psychologist.
I'm going to write this down.
I look at it from more of a research perspective. So, and how I answer that, and what people will typically do is they'll suppress their emotions, or they kind of cognitively reappraise them. And what I can tell you from the research wise is expressive suppression. That's where you try to swallow the emotions and just not deal with it, is unhealthy. It will boil to the surface like a pressure cooker. And so what you can better do as the supervisor is to help them cognitive reappraise. And what you're trying to do is remove any cognitive dissonance that they may be experiencing. And so
I guess one advice I give is that I know that people need a point for their emotions. And so I don't want that point to be, unnecessary bystanders like family members or the dog or whatever. So usually I would open it up to say, I need everyone to criticize to me what I'm doing wrong and what's happening. And so I just know that I can handle people telling me those kinds of things. And some of it might be real and some of it might not be real, but that people need to get it out somewhere. And if the supervisor can be the person that lets that happen, that's important. There's also the flip side of the same coin. One of the things I need, so I would call that being resilient. The other thing I need from my leader is optimism. And so I need the leader, or as a leader, to say everything's going to be fine. So when my classes turned online, the first email I said is, I've taught lots of online classes, no problem. It's all going to work out, right? And so you have to be optimistic about the company's future, about the department's future, about raises in the future, that you need people to catch the optimism, right? That the immediacy with social unrest, with the election, climate change, and my client's unhappy, like I can't keep getting all the negatives. So somebody has to sort of be the guiding light for the positive. And even if you're being a little bit theatrical as the leader, it works.
There's a leadership theory called the dramaturgical theory of leadership, and it borrows heavily from the idea of Shakespeare's, that we're all on a stage just playing the part. And this is where, as the leader, you have to, what Nathan is saying, you're going to have to fake it because you're experiencing as well. But that means you also, as a leader, must still have a mentor or a confidant group that you have in your trust circle, because you cannot suppress your emotions either. It will bubble up, and it's not just stereotypes. We all have to let that valve release. And so the more we can do the cognitive reappraisal, the healthier it is in processing.
If you're an executive, if you're listening right now and you're an executive, it's helpful for the first level supervisors to say to their team, I was just talking to the executive and he or she said things were good, right? They're not inferring, they just actually heard it. Joe, here's a question for you. It says, accountability is fine. I don't interfere with my subordinates and give deadlines or set up weekly check-ins, but where do you stand on seeing the work in progress? do you have specific checkpoints like 60% or 40%? Like how do you
Yeah,
do that?
without knowing the exact works, and I'm not asking you to disclose that, this is where in this virtual environment, you're shifting more from that process to accountabilities. If you're trying to cut up those processes in, you think of it in phases, and are you clear with what you want in your expectation to kind of guide them? And that's where, the management by objectives, you're willing as a supervisor, and you got to make sure your subordinates are willing as well, as to adjust those objectives if need be. Now, if they're failing miserably short, then you have to hold them to account in a disciplinary. You have to do more punishment than you can do positive and negative reinforcers.
So also, I guess one thing from project management that I guess there's some tips from project management that would be easier to show, but having a projected man-hour time so ask someone to project how many man-hours it might take them to do a particular task, and then maybe ask them to report at like you're suggesting, like at a milestone point at 25% milestone time, how many man-hours have you spent? And if you're already 50% over the man-hours that you anticipated you'd use, then maybe that's where I, as a supervisor, would say, are there things that I could do to make the process more efficient? Are there obstacles you're facing that you didn't expect? So maybe instead of asking about the process, you might ask about money spent or man-hour time spent to see if that has a big deal. Um,
And we have,
I think that's what the
I
CFO
wanted to
wants
share
see.
real quick. What's that?
I guess they said with that. I guess something else just popped up. But yeah, I think that's what the CFO cares about. Is it going to cost me more than I thought it was going to cost me?
Yeah, probably a hard thing for students to understand, that organizations are in the business to make money, and that's real to them. With money, we did collect some data, some interviews with companies early on in the pandemic, and I wanted to share someone here who are supervisors. One of the supervisors we interviewed simply asked his company, and I like, if you don't ask, you don't know. He asked his company, since we can't use our travel budget to send our employees to these conferences, can I use this travel budget to send out care packages to my subordinates? And he was surprised that his CFO signed off on it, and it became a company-wide policy. Instead of the organization grabbing that money back, they had already allocated it for fiscal year 2020 for travel. Why not use it and kind of help it? And it wasn't anything over the top. It was just that we understand we find ourselves in a bad situation, and it gave them a way to have that emotional attachment. And you may have seen also on LinkedIn, there's been I don't have any data on this yet. This is anecdotal. Supervisors are changing their LinkedIn professional photos to be more personal and reflective of them in the home environment. And there's a trend to have a picture of the supervisor with their pet. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's kind of saying, hey, we're all in this boat together.
Somebody was posting stuff about single workers. Did you have any reports on the single workers, Joe?
Just anecdotal stuff, not enough data to make any conclusions, but I can tell you of some single workers that have been interviewed. These were all IT type workers. And this is why it stood out to me. It was these IT workers who felt that, we have the stereotype where they're kind of social loners anyway. They don't want to interact with people. They're reporting feeling more loneliness because it wasn't the day-to-day conversation. It was just being in the presence of people. And they seemed to not have anyone checking on them. And one of the reflections was, I just wish someone would call. And I see someone on here says that they had quite a few going to council. And that's what it's been, is just being in that social environment to take in those social cues has increased our levels of depression and anxiety.
So I don't know if there's a magic number that it's called the 150 relationships, people that you can basically successfully incorporate in your life. And I guess I would say even before the pandemic, I would say many of the students that are graduating or that have graduated have nowhere near 150 friends, and that they're actually already pretty lonely. And probably what you're seeing is they were probably lonely going into the pandemic, and that was just amplified by the situation. So in my experience, yeah, this has been a challenge that you wouldn't think you'd have to include as part of your supervisory relationships. But I think, yeah, uh, how do you as a professional build a network? What groups do you go to? How do you stay entertained as a professional with other people? How do you find people like you? I think that there's been a lot of people that had challenges with that. And so maybe one change for myself is that there was no Facebook when I was an undergraduate student. So I had to basically make all new friends, or I'd be writing a lot of letters back home. But students could basically stay connected with their same 5 friends from the street that they grew up on their whole life. But that doesn't necessarily teach you how to make 5 new friends. And I would say the pandemic is maybe showing that maybe some people didn't have a very strong support network to begin with, and so now they're having a hard time finding how to get it.
But we are, the Society for Human Resource Management is reporting, and I don't want to say a number off the top of my head because I don't want it to be inaccurate, but it's more than 50% of your employees are actually searching for remote work now. They're realizing that work was a big part of my identity, and I no longer really want that. I want to go out and do more things. And is this remote work possible? And I did a search this morning just to kind of see, and I did remote jobs on Indeed, and it pulled back 14,000 with points of contact somehow to Illinois. And I suspect that you might have some of your employees, even when we do return back to in office, are going to want to stay virtual. They're going to want to stay remote.
So my dad's kind of an executive, and have you seen those commercials on TV about how to teach adults not to talk to people at the store?
Yes.
My kid said, "Grandpa, that's you," because that's what he did at work. He walked around and talked to people that weren't talking to anyone. If we're in line at Home Depot, he tells a joke to the cashier, because that's the type of thing that executives do to make sure everyone is feeling like they belong, but now they can't do when it's virtual. And so someone here said they organize cycling events, ways to keep people busy, physical activities. I would say that those are great examples of things that you could do as a executive inside the company to show symbols of ways people belong to that organization. And you could go beyond that to like kayaking, orienteering, geocaching, all these things that are socially distanced, to just try to, I would encourage expanding it to go way beyond that. Because I know in the commercial we're making fun of that behavior, but in reality, that's part of what we probably need to do to make people feel like they belong.
We're social creatures, and we have to have that interaction.
So my kids, like there's one where the guy has blue hair. Did you see? I guess I'm talking too much to people. Let me know. But they're like, yes. Grandpa, you would have told that guy he had blue hair. And I've lived with my dad my whole life. Yes, he would. Hey, how's that blue hair turning out? That's just what the first thing he'd say to someone that walked by with blue hair.
So the beer gardens are still open during the pandemic. It's all outside.
My wife won't let me go.
Well, we're over our hour, so we don't want to keep you. Yeah, but we'll entertain questions.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Both of you, this was very insightful. And as you said, this virtual leadership thing is here to stay, and we all have so much that we can learn and grow in this. And so this session has been very insightful. Lots of tidbits and takeaways that we can all actually apply today and starting now. So thank you again. We are grateful for this partnership with the College of Business and are thrilled to share the expertise that our faculty and their research that they have with our alumni. So thank you all for joining us. As a reminder, today's session was recorded, and we are doing a third session on December 8th. So if you're interested in joining for that, please feel free to sign up. And finally, you're going to receive a survey. We welcome any feedback you have on today's session and any other future sessions you have. But without that, thank you again to our presenters. Thank you all for joining us. And
I guess, Jeannie, I would say you didn't let me share the file into the chat for the PowerPoint.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
I guess I
Did
can if people want it.
Yeah, or I can always email it out too.
Yeah, I'll just send mine to you and we'll get them distributed. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll have that available too if anybody needs it. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
If you want to stay on, please do, but otherwise we understand.